Hey everybody, welcome, Roy here. So here we are on the third eye chakra, week 6. And today what we're going to do is we're going to tease out layering and centering in the six senses. And a nice simple way to describe it, maybe I'll describe the 6 senses briefly. What you see, what you hear, what you feel, what you smell, what you taste. And then the 6th sense is sense itself. And an easy way to describe that, and again, I always use this description. This room is my mind. Is the room you're in is your mind, and then within that, they'll pick a wall or a frame or a picture or something, and that's your mind screen. So that's where all your thoughts are. So you're not your thoughts, so you can detach from your thoughts. You can come away from them. Then you're in the room itself. That's your mind field. So when you hear people talking about open up your mind, it's about coming into that spaciousness within your mind, the mind field itself. And that as you engage in that, you recognize there's a part of yourself that's not thought, but awareness itself. So the watcher, the listener, the feeler, the sensor. So within that, there's that experience of consciousness itself. So in your listening, as you come into the silence of your listening, you'll recognize that there's a presence within that. That's your consciousness. And that's the 6th sense, is that consciousness, the consciousness of being. So how do you get all your other 5 senses to center themselves so that your 6th sense can come to the fore? Okay, and that we do that very clearly in our mind's eye, that we're activating the 6 senses in our third eye. That's the conversation today, no problem. So that's what we're going to do. Normally, I recap. How do we get to here? So let's go back a little bit. Is the first thing I said was we need to center ourselves in our mind ourselves. Yeah. So back into that awareness within, and connecting to and becoming aware of the knower within us. Is what is it like to know anything? It's the if you're going to have the experience of knowing something, what's that experience of knowing, and who is that knower within you? So how do you know when you know something? Is a simple way to describe it. Yeah. So my own experience of understanding that is through deduction, is knowing what I'm not. I'm not that thing. So I remember looking at a wall one time in my life and looking at the wall and knowing in my heart and soul, I'm not that wall. And it was the sense of knowing itself that it activated the knower within me. I knew what it was to know. So then I can measure off. So as I took all the things out that I'm not, whatever is left that I cannot take out, well, that's constant, and that's what I am. I'm constants. So whatever constants I can find, I am that thing. And that brought me all the way back to not my thoughts. I'm in the mind field. I'm in my senses, and take all these things out. And what's left is consciousness itself. And I couldn't take out consciousness. So I know I am that consciousness, and I'm awakening the knower within me, if you understand. Okay, so it's think about you now attuning to that sense of knowing within yourself. So as you do, is then what we're looking to do is now open up the space. Is we're looking to create a spatial awareness. So we'll go through using our senses. Is think about the practice of sitting in silence and listening to sounds, and then getting a sense of where you are, and then the distance between you and the sound. And as you get a sense of that distance, then the space in between. And that's you opening up space. So now you're sitting in your center, physically, energetically, mentally. You're sitting in the knowing of that space. And now you're looking at opening up that space. And the more you open up that space, is then think about how are you going to hold that space together? What is it? What way do you hold that space that allows you to have more experiences? Is to filter things. So part of that conversation that we had is you're going to experience 3 basic tendencies. Is you're going to experience pleasure, you're going to experience pain, and you're going to experience a neutral state. And they're the three basic experiences of life. And that as we center ourselves in that spaciousness with awareness, the knowing of awareness, as we center ourselves in that space, is how do we treat all things equally? So whether it's a pleasant thing or an unpleasant thing, is that how do we let that thing come in, that thought come in, that emotion come in, that feeling come in, that life story come in, and how do we hold the space open, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant? And basically the idea is that we treat both equally. So we treat them both equally. And it's very much if you think about the conversation about you have two kids, a son and a daughter, is which one do you favor? Is which one do you like more than the other? Is you wouldn't do that. So what you do is you hold this space open for both. And really what both kids want, and all people want, is they want to be seen and they want to be felt. That's the simple crux of it. At a baseline, we all want to be seen and we all want to be felt. So in all the things that are most important to you in your life, all your core values, is whether it's family, relationships, your work, how you engage with community, is all the things that are most important to you. The more you're seen and felt in them, the more connected you feel. The less seen or felt you are in them, it's harder to feel that connection yourself. We can feel isolated or disconnected. So holding that space open for ourselves is we're holding the space open with awareness. And it's the willingness to be present. It's the willingness to observe and understand, not to change or put expectations on it or desires or judge it. Is to understand it is a very different state of mind, because it means we give our attention fully to it. And then we want to feel it, want to give it the energy to express itself. So we're holding that state open where our mind is open, our heart is open, and we're just allowing ourselves to experience whatever's going on. And that we give both the pleasant and the unpleasant the same space, the same awareness. We don't treat them any different. And the intention is to understand. And as we observe that story, we're going to be told two basic stories. We'll be told our hurt story, and we'll be told our truth story. And what's the difference? Is if you think about pain is the experience of separation. You break your skin, you tear a muscle, you break a bone. Emotionally, somebody doesn't love you. Intellectually, somebody you respect says, I don't respect you. Whatever it is just that experience of separation is what hurts. That's what hurts us. And if the hurt is too much, we end up struggling. We go into fight or flight. And when we go into fight or flight, we're going to run away, or we're going to attack or try and hide. Pretend it's not happening. We bury our heads, yeah? Is in that fight or flight, we're struggling. So a person can get one bang in the head in their life and it can hurt, but they could walk around for the rest of their life being afraid of getting another bang in the head. And the anxiety that creates, that suffering that creates, is far greater than getting a bang in the head. So we can experience hurt, and then we can also experience the fear and the suffering that comes in that. And it's that experience of separation. So when we feel naturally connected to ourselves, we feel connected. We're in the oneness of ourselves, the natural authenticity of ourselves. If we feel hurt and afraid and then feel some form of separation and we're struggling with that, that's two-ness. We're experiencing a two-ness within ourselves. So it's a bit like the mind screen is I'm looking at my thoughts over there. My awareness is here, my presence is here, but I'm treating my thoughts as if they're real. So I'm treating those thoughts as if that's who I am. And that's the experience of separation. I treat the mind screen as reality rather than my own consciousness as reality. Okay, so that's where we get the two stories. So there's the hurt story, and then the truth story, the connection story. So we're holding this space open. We want to see ourselves. We want to feel ourselves. Everybody wants that. So the first person that needs to give that to us is ourselves. When we're adults, is ourselves. We look for it off our parents and off our family and off our peers. We'll all look for that in different ways in life. But when we're going to take universal responsibility for ourselves, take full ownership of our own experience, is then we're the ones who need to give that to ourselves first. So we're holding that space open. And then we're observing the stories that come in, our experiences, our states of mind, their thoughts or feelings, the story around them. And what we're looking to do is recognize the difference, recognize the difference between what's real and what's unreal. What's real and what's unreal. What's our hurt story and what's our truth story. And that we're looking to listen enough, to feel enough in ourselves and look with new eyes. So rather than just hearing the same story, is we listen intently and we notice things we haven't noticed before. We see things we hadn't seen before. We feel things we haven't felt before. And that little bit of newness is insight. So that when we see something we hadn't seen before, it's like we're seeing connections. When you put two things together that you hadn't seen before, that's a connection, that's an insight. So when you see that connection, is that then that adds to the story and you're seeing insight. And the more you see your story, the more you're seeing more and more insight. And what we're looking for is to bring more and more insight in, because insight is connection. Insight allows us to see the truth of it, and it also allows us to see where those separations happened. So as we pull back the layers within ourselves, is as we let go more of the hurt story, we're letting go of more of our fears. We can see the pattern of fear and we're letting it go. And then we're stepping more into ourselves. And then we see a little bit more fear, we let that go. And then at one point, rather than seeing the fear, is we experience the hurt of it. We're getting right to the cause rather than the symptom. Our fears are the symptom. The hurt is the cause. That's what's causing the pain, is the hurt. So when we can see the hurt, what is it that we need to learn that will allow us to reconnect to ourselves, to come back into that authenticity within ourselves, and that we're fearless in it, and that we're not in the pain of it, we're just in the being of it. We're in that natural state. What's that story? And then that's our truth story. And that the arc of our lives is both the journey we go on in the hurt, and then the search we go on to find back the truth. And both are equally valuable. What do I mean by that? Is we talked about this in one of the other videos. Excuse me. Let's say I use patience. Let's say you needed to learn patience, and your impatience is creating too many mistakes, too many misinterpretations. It's getting all messy. That your impatience causes hurt, causes suffering, and he's like, I really got to figure this out. Well, you will only figure out your patience is when you can measure it off your impatience. So if you think about this, is that if you spend every day in happiness and not one day of sadness, well, then how do you know you're happy? Like, where's your measure if all you've ever experienced is happiness? Then one day you feel sadness, and it will be traumatic to you because it's like, oh my God, it's your first day. But then the next day you felt happiness, you'd be so elated in it because you now have a measure and a value of your happiness. So you part of understanding the journey of life is understanding the opposites of things, the play of things, is understanding the play of pleasure and pain, and that they're intrinsically linked. There's a very thin line between both of them. Too much pleasure is uncomfortable. A little bit of pain is actually quite pleasant. It's just the way of life. So now, if you think is that for you to understand, or for me, my story I was telling you in one of the other courses, for me to understand patience, I also have to understand my impatience. And that sometimes it's right to be impatient, and sometimes it's right to be patient. And knowing the balance of that is finding the wave within myself. Equally with the happiness and the sadness, sometimes we can be authentically sad, and it's the truth of it. And it's the natural time when it's authentic, and there's a rightness to that. And it lifts us because we're authentically sad. We're not less because of it, we're more because of it. Equally in our happiness, there's times when we're authentically happy, and that gives us a lift. And if we allow ourselves to experience our humanity, we will experience the scale of that as we go through our lives, and that we can live the authenticity of that. So even in our tough times, we can still be lifted. We can still hold the space open. We can still experience the fullness of the experience without having to go into the suffering. I can be sad without suffering. I can be sad without having to be so hurt in it. I can be just at peace with the sadness. I'm not fighting it. So that I'm in the being of the sadness. And that when my sadness appears, it's not like everything else disappears. Is in my center, my space is big enough to hold everything that I am. So all those different qualities and states that make up Roy, so to speak, can be held in the one space. And while one comes to the fore, the rest are still there. They don't leave. They don't have to leave. So it's not living in that space of separation anymore. It's living in the space of oneness, and within that is the humanity of myself. It's the humanity of ourselves. It's just the complexity of human existence itself, and that we can be in the fullness of that, and at the same time be in the being of ourselves, in that beautiful connection within ourselves. We can be both. So. I think I'm waffling on a little bit. I'm making sense. I know it's great, but I need to get to the point, is because I'm doing a summary, so I don't want the whole session to be about this. So now we're looking at recognizing the difference between our truth story and our hurt story, and recognizing the difference, yeah? Is part of what we were doing is, if you remember last week, we brought in the 5 elements. And the reason why I did that is because we're looking at what are some baselines that we can use to measure our experience, and how can it accelerate the whole understanding of ourselves and really ground our third eye consciousness into our environment. So if you think about, I'll say it to you this way, the earth element is the body has a way it can be, that it can be centered and connected into the earth, and that there's a real support between the body and the earth. There's a real engagement. That force of gravity is working through us. It can really create a real feeling of physical embodiment. We can be fully in our bodies and fully grounded in the earth. And a nice way to describe it is, imagine no matter what part of your body touched the ground, you were connected, and that you stayed in that grounded connection. So that when you go internally into yourself, at an emotional level, at a mental level, all the outer rooms in your life, all the people in your life, all the situations in your life, you only stood on one ground, rather than some grounds I'm ungrounded and I'm distracted. Other times I can be collapsing and I'm struggling on the ground. We can have all these different levels of engagement in the ground, in ourselves and in our lives. What would happen if we just had one ground? You understand that? So the more we bring in the elements to our practice, is the more you're able to see their ground, is then you're measuring everything off their ground. And a simple example of that as a life skill, in a yoga class, it's great. You get 10, 15, 20 people come into the room. Everybody's coming in. Got to center everybody, got to bring everybody together. But everybody's coming from different places, and some are work, some are home, some are up, some are down. There's everybody coming in, all different combinations of positions they're in within themselves. Now, getting everybody to come into the one ground, and then getting everybody to come into the one ground as a group, means that the experience is for everybody can be far more empowering, because we've all come and met on the one ground. It's very powerful as a life skill. And this can be done in any room, any group of people. Is the engagement in that process can be very, very powerful. So that's just the earth element. But then remember, I talked about the flow, the ability to get things moving, is the ability to keep things moving in yourself, whether it's your body, whether it's your energetics, and allowing yourself to move fluidly in what you feel, or fluidly in your mind. There's a certain pace that we all move at. That's our center of gravity. So when I'm moving on my physical center of gravity, my muscles naturally tone and release. They're spontaneous. I'm in the being of my body. I'm in the moving meditation of my body. I'm in my center of gravity. But now that equally is the same on an energetic, emotional level and equally a mental level. We can engage in that with our thoughts, just moving fluidly in the spontaneity of the thoughts. Where if the thoughts move too fast, well, it's hard. You won't be able to do that. You won't be able to release them. If the thoughts or the emotions are all jittery and rigid, is we lose that natural spontaneity, and that's the flow state. But then equally is you layer that into your life. Imagine you found that pace within yourself that allowed you to stay grounded and fluid, that allowed you to feel the space out and communicate what's going on, that it let you see what was happening, experience it in your own mind, and then communicate clearly at a pace and a rate that allowed other people to understand what you were saying to your best communication. Just as an example. And that's the flow state, where the fire is about the expansion and contraction, your ability to create space, where the air is about finding that space where you find the right space within yourself, is then just allow yourself to glide in it, be light in it. And that the ether is the spaciousness itself. So what you're doing is as you observe that space, holding it open for yourself, looking to recognize the difference between what's my truth here and what's my hurt story. Well, what's the ground that it's all on? How do I bring all of my story to the one ground? And if some of my story is from hurt and collapsing, I can recognize not necessarily the words I'm speaking, but I can recognize that I'm speaking from a place of collapsing in that. What would happen if I just brought those words or that feeling to a ground? How would those words change in me when it speaks from a ground? So now the hurt gets released out of it, and then I get to hear it from the one ground. It lets me measure the truth of things for myself. Is I'm listening to something in myself and everything's rushing around really, really crazy, so fast I can barely understand what's going on in myself. Is now I can see that I'm just ungrounded and I'm rushing around in that. What would happen if I just slowed down the pace? That I didn't try to change what I was feeling or thinking, but what I did is that I just encouraged it to slow down at a rate that can actually make a bit more sense. So I slowed down the pace and listened to it from the one ground. What would myself say? How would I communicate differently? What way would that adapt my story that I can begin to recognize the difference between, again, the hurt of it and then the truth of it? That I'm bringing myself into one place and centering myself on all the elements. And again, we're activating the third eye within ourselves. We're activating our sight, we're activating our knower, and we're activating our intuition. So we're going to refine that a little bit more today when we talk about the senses. So now, I know I could have said stuff about the 4 levels of consciousness, but I'm mindful that I could be talking all night about this. So if you're looking for the 4 states of consciousness, go back to one of the other videos. So here's the thought for you, is with all your senses, what would happen if you brought them all back to their default? Imagine you come into existence. You're here. And you come in with all your senses, and you had all your senses there, and you were aware, but you had no previous experience to measure things off. So now all your senses are back at the default, and there's no past memory to rely on for your experience. And it's very much like a kid, a baby. A baby coming in is just, it's just there. So all the senses, there's even the presence in the child. The ability to communicate is not well, it's there a little bit, but not very much, because the brain is still forming, but all the senses are there, and your awareness is there. What would your experience of all your senses be like if you just brought them back to the default? A simple way to answer that is that you would begin to connect into the source of each one of those senses. What does that mean? Let's use the ears listening as the first example. When a person is truly listening, is they're listening from a place of silence. If a person just wants to hear what they want to hear, well, then they're listening out for the thing they want to hear. So if I want to hear 99 all the time, I'll be listening for the nines. If I want to see red all the time, I'll be watching out for the red. And when I'm watching out for the red or listening out for the nines or 99s, I'm not listening out for anything else. So when I'm in a state of listening, there's not one specific thing that I'm listening out for. I'm just in a state of listening. So what that does is that creates a silence within me. It brings me to a place of silence. Okay? So yeah, two things I want to say here. I'm just figuring out which one will I say first. Okay, I'll say this one. Is if a person sits in silence long enough, they'll realize that the silence they're sitting in is constant and that all sounds arise from silence and return to silence. So if you think about before any sound comes in, it's silent. Then the sound appears, the sound then dissolves back into silence. So the loudest sound is silence, because silence is the constant. Every other sound comes and goes. And silence is the true constant. So that if you think about silence as a universal experience, is that's the truth of it. And that you're coming into that state of connected openness. Let me explain it this way. This is the second thing I want to say. So remember, you're not your thoughts. So you can come away from the mind screen. So now you're in the mind field. And then you sit long enough in the mind field and you realize there's awareness there. There's just consciousness. So the watcher, the listener, the feeler. So now let's say the listener, you're sitting there and listening. So you're attuning to your consciousness through listening. And in that you tap into the silence of reality. So now you're sitting in silence. And in the silence is you recognize that there is a presence. You've got your own sense of presence in it. You can experience it, your consciousness, and you'll experience it as that sense of presence within yourself. And a simple way to describe this now is what I want you to do, we're going to do it for 10 or 15 seconds, is just gently close your eyes. And for 10 or 15 seconds, we're all going to sit and just listen to each other being silent. And then nice and gently, just allowing your eyes to open. So did you notice that when you sat there in silence and we were listening to each other being silent, that in that your own sense of presence came to the fore, is your consciousness came to the fore. So now here's the odd thing about that, is that where's the boundary in silence? Where's the boundary in silence? And some people might say that a sound is a boundary. So that when a sound comes in, oh, there's a boundary. Okay, no, because that's a sound. When we're in silence ourselves, just silence itself, is where's the boundary? Then people say, well, there is no boundary. And that's right. Silence is a boundless state. And that when we come into that boundless state, there's no edges to it, there's no limits to it, it's boundless. And here's one of the paradoxes is, but yet there was presence. So how can your presence be contained in something that is boundless? Because normally we would say to hold water, you need a container. So when you pour the water into a container, the water's there. But when you've no container, what happens to the water? So how can there be consciousness? How can there be that consciousness of being in a boundless state. And again, that's one of the paradoxes of life. I don't think anybody has figured that out yet. So anyway, so now when you attune to that silence, you're attuning to that beautiful boundless state, a constant. And remember, is anything you can't take out. So you can't take that silence out. No matter how many times you want to shout, no matter how much sound you fill into your life, is each one of those sounds between them is there's micro moments of silence. Is even in movements in the breath, there's the inhale and the exhale. Before every change of breath, there's a moment of pause, and that we shift to the next. So we're inhaling, there's a pause. We're exhaling, there's a pause. Those pauses, they're like moments of silence, moments of stillness within ourselves. Is that we're coming into that boundless state. Is the body moves in circles. So that in every circle there's a moment where it comes to completion, and then we rotate. So we're perpetually moving in circles and cycles, that at the center of them, there's a boundless state. And all our senses have exactly the same thing. Okay, so when you're coming into the silence, you're finding that boundlessness within yourself. And then you're also coming into your consciousness of being. The more we center all our senses back in that, is the primary one, the sixth sense, comes to the fore. That's our consciousness of being itself. That's our constant self. That's the self that cannot be affected by anything in life. It's not affected. It's there at the start. It's all the way through. It's there at the end. It never once disappears. It never once changes. It never skips a beat. It never trips over itself. It can be unaffected, cannot be affected. Now, we cannot pay attention to it. We can be looking over there and going, well, that's my life, or that's who I am, or that's what I'm feeling, or that's where I'll give over myself to. And that's all fine, but they're not constants. But anytime you come back and you attune to your center and come into that consciousness, it's there. It's always there. It goes nowhere. It's like a frequency. It goes nowhere. And then every time we attune to it, there it is. At what point do we come in and attune to it and then realize this is home? This is actually where it's real. This is where I reside. This is where I get to see the truth of things. This is where I experience reality. This is where I see what's truly going on. This is where I can begin to recognize the difference between the hurt and the truth. And then within that, I can begin to see what's most important to me. And then I can begin to actualize that. I can bring in the power of the unconscious potential. I can begin to understand the power of my subconscious mind, where the ability to treat everything as real is just most important. I'm actually focusing on reality, because if I treat things that are not real as real, that's going to hurt and it's going to suffer more. So therefore, as we're beginning to filter the difference between our hurt story and our truth story, is we're raising our consciousness, we're raising our energy, we're drawing on our true potential. That's our unconscious mind and our absolute potential. We're drawing on our subconscious mind and their ability to treat everything as real. That's our ability to actualize. We just got to make sure that we're actually focusing on reality itself. We want to build a life based on reality rather than based on the dreams in our mind or the things we feel that we want to happen. Reality needs to be here and now. So now what we're doing is we're bringing that into our conscious mind, and we're activating our consciousness. And the one power of consciousness is consciousness itself. Once you get that, you don't trade it for anything. Anything. You don't trade it. What's the value of giving this over to some idea, because, or how I feel? How I feel convinces me that it's more real than I am. So now I'll give my consciousness over to a feeling. I'm convincing myself it's real, until I realize that feeling is only going to last 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 months. It doesn't matter what it is, it will eventually come away. It'll eventually release itself. So how many times do we go through that process until we realize the difference between this consciousness of presence of being is real, all the things that move through it is I've got to recognize the difference between, is it my hurt story or is it my truth story? And then I begin to build my life, you build your life on your truth story. And you're holding the integrity of that within yourself. And then you're engaging with your life that way. Fascinating. Fascinating. So now, listening. Now, watching. Bringing yourself to a place of silence, your consciousness heightens. Bringing yourself to the watcher is, think of this, think of the difference. The difference between watching and seeing. If you're just sitting in the present moment watching, then you're just observing as things happen. And you're engaging with the happening of things. If we sit there and we just want to see the things we want to see, well, then we're localizing what we want to see. Everything else we ignore. Okay? And that can be detrimental if the things we're looking for are not real. Does that make sense? That's a problem. So now, as a baseline, we need to center our ability to see in the present moment, and we need to shift from searching and looking for things we want to just seeing. So we're in a state of listening, just listening. We're in a state of watching, we're just watching. Now, this is the interesting bit. Bringing that back to the default is, what's the experience when you're watching? It's the experience of clarity, consciousness, clearly observing, clarity. This is a trick question. What's the color of clarity? It's a silly trick question. I only ever ask silly or stupid trick questions, but it's still a trick question. Sometimes people will say white. White, it's white. It's not white. It's transparency. And think about it. If you're watching consciously from a place of clarity, it's your ability to see and permeate through things. So clarity allows things to be transparent, that you're able to see that if it's your behavior, you're able to see your environment. You're able to see the behavior in the environment. You're able to see the strategies of the behavior. You're able to see the capabilities that we bring to it. We're able to see our values, the things that we believe most about it. We can see our identity, the purpose, the reason why we're doing what we're doing. Clarity allows us to see all the way through. So tapping into that state of clarity, and we're just watching within ourselves. It's coming to that clearness within ourselves. And in the practice today, I'll take you through the different senses, just coming into that clearness. So think about opening the mind is coming into a silence. That sense opens the mind. Now coming into a state of clarity, the mind opens a little bit more. The consciousness is becoming clearer within the mind, and we're just observing. So now, feeling. Okay, so feeling is, I'll ask it this way. What's the difference between feeling and emotion? Feeling and emotion. And again, you'll notice there's a pattern to this, is when the difference between listening and hearing is, when I'm hearing is because I'm trying to control, and in that there's some form of struggle. When I'm listening, there's no struggle. So if I'm hearing stuff, I could be inclined to hear my hurt story, because again, I'm attracted to that in ways, I'm attached to that. But when I'm listening to the whole story. So I don't just hear the hurt story, I hear the truth story, because I'm listening to everything. Okay, same when I'm watching, as opposed to looking for. If I'm looking for the things I'm attached to, and some of the things I'm attached to are my suffering and my hurt. But if I'm watching, I'm watching everything. So then there's a greater story going on, and part of that is the truth, the connection of things, and I'm able to see the interplay of them because I'm watching it all. I'm not leaving anything out. So now when I'm feeling is the difference between feeling and emotion. What's the difference? Okay, now what I've spoken about this in different videos. Again, emoting is the struggle. It's the push and pull. So if I'm in an emotional state, I'm looking for attachments, the things that charge me up, the different emotions that I'm attached to. I'm looking for those. I'm looking for the reflection of those. Where if I'm in a state of feeling, I'm looking to understand and feel everything. And there's no separateness in that. I'll feel whatever. And then in that, the more we can come in to that state of feeling, what's that like? And again, how does it bring us back to that boundless state? Like silence is a boundless state. Is when you're in that state of clarity, it's boundless. The boundless state. It's just that when you're in that state, it sort of feels like no matter what you look at, you'll experience the clarity of it. You can see into everything. It's a beautiful experience. You look long enough, you'll see right into anything you need to see into. Feeling. How is that a boundless state? I'll ask it this way. Again, it's a silly trick question. What's the first thing you feel all the time? What's the first thing you feel all the time? First thing you feel all the time. What's the first thing you felt? And then what's the first thing you feel all the time? And the answer is feeling. For you to feel something, like if you want to feel happy, you want to feel sad, you want to feel the pressure in your hand, you want to feel a thought, you want to feel the person in the room, you want to feel the atmosphere of a room, is before you feel all those things, the first thing you have to do is feel itself. So the first thing we do with feeling is feeling itself. And that feeling is our life force, is the first thing we feel is our life force. Our life force feels. It's our baseline experience. So what would happen if you just came back to your baseline default experience of just feeling your life force, or just feeling life itself? And not the attachments to it, just life itself. Just think about the baby just so open to the world, and you can just see they're feeling everything. And really what they're feeling is life itself. What would it be like if you could just sit in that state of feeling? You'd feel all of life. You're back into that boundlessness of it again. And remember, we talked about our unconscious potential. You can see how all our senses can tap into that unconscious potential, that boundlessness within us. What sounds could silence bring? And all of them, that's the potential. Same with clarity. The potential of that's enormous. What will come from our clarity? All things come from clarity and return back to clarity. All sensations come from a baseline of feeling and return back to a baseline of feeling. So life, and then all things from life, all the different forms of life come from that and return back to it. And we're just in that state of feeling of our life force. Feeling itself. It's beautiful. Now then, what's the potential of you to feel? What's your ability to then take your subconscious experience, all the attachments without self-awareness, the things we attach to in our lives without realizing, without self-awareness, as we take all those attachments and we bring them into our consciousness and we begin to observe the difference between what's our hurt story and what's our truth story, now we're holding feeling, a baseline feeling of aliveness, and measuring our aliveness within them. Where's my aliveness in this? Where's my clarity in this? Where's my stillness of silence in this? Where's my being in this? Where's my intuitive sense of consciousness in this? Where's my innate sense of myself? Where's my spontaneous self? Where am I most authentic? Where I can be in this and be in the being of it. Everybody get that? Absolutely gorgeous. Super. So 2 more senses is the sense of smell. So sense of smell. Sense of smell is, if you think about this, it's all about subtlety. Sense of smell is all about the micro. It's all about the micro. It's all about the subtle. Every smell is the subtle. Think about this. All we need is the smallest amount of something to smell it. Now, if you take what you're smelling out of it and you just go into that sense of smell itself, it's all about opening up the subtle world. Believe it or not, it's all about the subtle world. The sense of smell is all about subtlety. Now, imagine opening up to how can I say it? You know the way dogs can hear sounds that we can't hear, or they can smell things that we can't hear. There's a whole range of senses that they have that they're more heightened in those because again the level of consciousness that the dog engages with, that they're much more at that instinctual level, that their sense of smell, their sense of hearing would be heightened. Does that make sense? But it's that subtlety of being able to experience our world at a more subtle level. Now, what would happen if we could tap into our sense of smell and then just tap into the subtlety within it? That the micro movements, that we're able to recognize the micro of something, the smallest little thing, and recognize the pattern of it. What would happen? And I'll give you an example. Is think about the smallest little thing that will have the biggest effect. And I use the physicalness as an example, and then I'll relate it to smell and subtlety. Is if you look at my hand, okay, tip of my finger, look at how big the movement is. A big movement. But if you look at my wrists, movement's a little less. My elbow's a little less. My ball and socket joint is a little less. And my collarbone's a little less. But when you go right into my spine, it's even smaller again. So right at the core of myself, this big movement here is a really small movement. And I move into my breath. I move into my subtle adjustment in my mind. Is that the smallest little movement that has the biggest effect? So that the more we can attune to the subtlety is, let's say you center yourself in your body. Then that same quality of center, you center it in your breath. It's more subtle, but it's the same center. Then you center in your mind. It's the same center, it's more subtle in your mind. But then you center in the being of yourself, that consciousness, even more subtle again. And that consciousness of being is so subtle. Think about the smallest little touch in you that is the biggest effect. And people talk about spirit and the spark of consciousness within us, or the spark of life within us is our spirit. It's the smallest little touch that has the biggest effect in our lives. Does that make sense? It's tapping into that subtle world of being. Now imagine taking the most subtle of breaths, that you're inhaling and you're exhaling. And that when you inhale and you exhale, you come to a beautiful pause at the end of your exhale. And you find a lovely stillness in that, and the subtlety of being in that breath. And then you're breathing, and then you're smelling, and you're engaging with your sense of smell. But you're not looking to smell a thing. You're looking to attune the subtlety of your sense of smell to your sense of being. So the subtlety and the micro experience of that allows you to really get into the subtlety. So as I breathe like this, I'm activating my sense of smell, and I'm moving in the micro movements of it. And I'm moving in that sense. Does that make sense? It's beautiful. Now, again, it's also a sense of smell. You'll also hear people talk about it's important for survival. That fresh, super important. That smells nice. That's not so nice. So again, it allows us to be part of our survival mechanism. But when you attune it to our sense of being and attuning to the activating our sixth sense, what we're really doing is using it to attune to our consciousness. That's where its real power is. So that we're in that with consciousness, and it's the consciousness of the absolute clarity of knowing. So you think about the more we activate our intuitive sense and moving all our senses into alignment, there's many things we can know without having to think, without having to have a thought. We can know the truth of something. And the more our senses are aligned with that, is we can read that subtle experience. So our sense of smell is really, really important to that. A simple way of describing it. Does it sound right? Does it look right? Does it feel right? Does it smell right? It might look right, might sound right, might feel right. Something doesn't smell right. And it's not necessarily the smell of the thing, but it's something more subtle than that is going on. That my sense of smell goes, there's something subtle going on there that's a little bit askew. And then we got to follow that sense of our smell of what is that subtle thing that we got to figure out. Okay? Fascinating. Okay, so I'll tease that out with you as well. Now into taste. Okay, again, we can use taste as oh, sorry, back to smell for a sec. You can understand when we get into the subtle world and how that just opens up to a boundless state. Is we get into the subtle experience of life and then all the potential of that. There's a boundlessness within that. There's a whole world of subtlety that's going on. And it's beautiful to live in that subtle world. But we can do it but being fully conscious and awake and fully engaged in the everyday life of things. But also you can begin to recognize the subtleties, the subtlety of a movement, the subtlety of a pattern of movement, you know, the ebb and flow of things. You can recognize more subtle uh, stuff. Anything. You get what I'm saying? Okay, so taste. Taste is, again, tastes nice, doesn't taste so nice, that tastes off. So we can use it as a form of survival and measuring things. But when you take all that out and then you just move into taste itself, is if you can take a swallow right now, and hopefully you didn't just have a coffee or eat onions or have a really strong taste in your mouth. If you just swallow and take a taste, there's not really anything that you're tasting. But now do it again. And then let me ask you a question. How intimate was it? Taste is very intimate. It's one of the experiences of intimacy itself. It's a very intimate experience. So if you think about intimacy is, and again, not relationship intimacy, put that to one side. Intimacy within ourselves is, think about what it's like to be so in ourselves that we are absolutely in the intimacy of ourselves. We're into the oneness. We're into the direct connection within ourselves. It's a very, very intimate experience. And understanding that baseline of intimacy, and very much is about the taste. It's that sense of taste within ourselves. Is the intimacy of that experience. So that literally our sense of taste very much brings us into that place where, look at other senses. We can watch, we can listen, we can feel, we can go into the subtlety of ourselves with our sense of smell, and then we go into the intimacy of our experience with the sense of taste. It's very, very intimate. And now think about when you get into the intimacy of being, is when you're in the intimacy of being, when you're in that boundless state of being within yourself and you're in the intimacy of it. It's boundless and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful connection. Think about being intimately connected to yourself continuously, and that it's a place that you just rest into. You reside in that intimacy and you're in the subtlety of it and how nice it feels. And then in the silence of it and the stillness of it and the clarity of it, that it allows us to really bring up in ourselves our consciousness, that presence of being within ourselves, which is our sixth sense, consciousness itself. And we're attuning all our senses to align with the sixth sense. And that's the power of activating and centering our senses appropriately, as opposed to getting caught up in the attachments of life. And that's always the challenge, is the being pulled into the attachments, being in a state of separation and then attaching to things. And what I mean is, think about if somebody is suffering. If somebody's suffering in their root chakra, they can be ungrounded, they can be unstable. So they can attach themselves to things that make them feel grounded. If somebody's ungrounded in their sacral, again, it's about the difference between drive and motivation. If somebody's personal drive and creativity feels overworked or exhausted, is people will move more into motivation and they'll attach themselves to things that motivate them. So now we can have our senses connected to things that motivate us, but those things that motivate us, they're always pulling us towards them. And then motivation can, if we get more and more tired, motivation has to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And all our senses are attached to those motivations. That's what happens in careers. People get so motivated by their career that all their senses are attached to achieving that goal. And a lot of times people will get so far into their career and then realize, what am I doing? I don't even want this. But the motivation brought them there. When a person centers themselves back in their life force and their drive, and they ask themselves, what really drives me? What's most important to me? How am I going to really channel my life force? And how do I want to be how do I creatively want to engage and live my life? Is then they'll start to recognize that the things that really drive them are different things in their life. And that the more they see the truth of that and activate their senses in that level of drive, then they find the energy coming back into themselves. They find that their drive coming back in, and all their senses are activating again. But it's in the uplifting of the energy and the consciousness, is the willingness to be able to hold the space open and go, this works for me, as opposed to this just draws the life out of me. This thing that I do is I'm running the life out of myself because all my senses are attached to that. I'm too attached to the image of what I'm trying to be, rather than being in the natural being of myself. I'm using that as an example. So, and just so you understand the difference between how do you use your senses to begin to recognize the difference between your hurt story and your truth story, is the more you can center yourself in your senses, it gives you a clearer understanding of the connection, of the continuity of your story, rather than in the separateness and the hurt of it. So, and then that's what we're doing, is slowly but surely is being able to recognize the difference between one and the other. So if you're going to use your intuition, if you're going to go, that's a great idea, I'm going to do that, yay. Okay, wait 1 sec. Let's just check in. Just as a practice, let's just check in. Is okay, it came to me, seems like a great idea, but does it look right? It does. Does it feel right? It does. Does it sound right? It does. Does it smell right? I'm not so sure. Does it taste right? Am I in the intimacy of it, or am I grabbing at it? Oh, not all of me is in it. Not all of me is in it. So what would it take for all of me to be in it? So the more we get used to checking all our senses within our lives, is within a certain situation, check in with all your senses. And what do all your senses experience? And what communication are they telling you? So a simple example is there's a room in your life, whatever room it is, there's people in life, situation. Pick any room. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the most challenging and 1 is just a bit of stress, pick a 3. Don't go for 10, please. We're just making it difficult. Pick a 3. So a room in your life with people in a situation where there's a stress level of 3. There's a resistance or a charge of 3. So it's not overly complicated. Now imagine you sat in that room, like you normally do, and you say, okay, for today, I'm going to sit in this room. I'm just going to listen. I'm just going to listen. I'm going to truly listen. I'm going to switch off all my judgments. I'm not going to be searching for, oh, this has been said, there's that there. Put all that down and just listen. What would you notice? Okay. Next day, okay, now I'm just going to watch. I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to go in with all these expectations. I'm not going to go in with any particular desires. I'm going to go in with an open mind, and I'm just going to watch. I'm going to be just open to watching, because I know I want to be understood. I want to be seen, and I want to be felt. Everybody else in that room wants exactly the same thing. And whatever you're working on is part of that goal in that situation for a group of people. Is everybody wants to be seen and everybody wants to be felt. That's the truth of it. So now what would happen if you went in with that understanding? You said, I'm just going to watch. Next day, I'm going to feel. Next day, I'm just going to sit in that sense of subtle. I'm going to come into that sense of smell. I'm just going to breathe nice and slow and easy. And I'm just going to come into that subtle experience. And I'm going to observe the subtle sensations in the room. Next day, I'm going to sit in the same room. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to attune myself to that sense of intimacy within myself. I'm just going to feel that intimacy of just being present and being there. And I'm going to listen, watch, feel, smell. I'm going to taste. I'm going to be in the intimacy of that. I'm going to be really there in that room. And I'm going to be in the intimacy, fully in it. And I'm just going to be observing from there. I'm going to be in that space. After you did that, how will that change your inner dialogue? How will that change the story of that room for you? Of the situation, whatever it is, of the story of the people in that room, the story of you in that room. How would your senses adapt to that story when you center yourself in all your senses? What would you notice that would be different? Fascinating. It's a fascinating practice. And that would be no different now if you now brought in a particular state of mind. And again, on a scale of 1 to 10, pick a 3, some state of mind that's a 3. And what I mean by 3, there's a charge in it. There's a struggle, a resistance of 3 in it. So it's one of those anxious states, but not too stressful. And what would happen if you sat with that and you did the same thing? I'm going to let myself be fully in this state of mind, whatever it is, happiness or sadness, whatever, because you can have resistance, you can have a charge in both. And you're going to sit with it and you're going to just go and listen. And I'm going to watch. And I'm going to feel. And I'm just going to feel the subtlety of what's going on. And then I'm going to be in the intimacy of what's going on. I'm just going to be absolutely present in it. I'm not going to try and change it. I'm not going to try and push it this way or that way. Actually, my intention is to understand. I want to know. I want to feel. And my knower is present. My feeler is present. And then they're open. What would happen? How would that change your story? What new bits would come out? What are you seeing that you didn't really see before? What are you hearing that you didn't really hear before? What are you feeling that you didn't really feel before? What are all those little moments of insight? The subtlety of this experience, the real intimacy of the experience for you. How would that change the story? It's fascinating. Okay? Fascinating. Okay, so I think what we do now is I think we do a little bit of practice. So what I want you to do is get nice and comfortable. Nice and comfortable. Okay. Oh, Jesus, can you believe I didn't really talk so much about the sixth sense? Okay. Well, let's start off. I'll start talking about that and I'll thread it in. Okay. So you're sitting nice and comfortable. Make sure you're sitting straight. I need you to sit that your pelvis is stable, so that you can sit easy and freely in your body and your spine, and that your legs are supported, your hips are fairly relaxed, in the sense of that they're engaged, but they're stable in it. They don't have the brace to hold you in position. And be sitting in your body, be sitting in your sit bone. So if you're using the wall or the back of a chair for support, use it to sit straight, but still keep your weight coming down through your sit bones. If you lean back into the chair, you're going to disengage, because you're disengaging your center of gravity, you're disengaging your physical ground. It's going to be harder for you to stay consciously engaged. You can trip off too easy. Okay, and just let the hands rest on the thighs, palms up or palms down, index finger touching or not, whatever's most comfortable. And then what I want you to do is ever so gently, just let yourself gently sway around your sit bones. Make a little circle. Just in that ever so gentle sway, just allow yourself to feel the ground, the connection of the support to your sit bones. And then start to come into the center of gravity of your body. Start to feel the spontaneous tone and release in your trunk, the trunk of your body. Have it very soothing. And then let me talk a little bit about the sixth sense as well. And I've already talked about it, but let me just define it a little bit more. So it's you coming into the mind field and then recognizing the awareness in it. There's an awareness in it. And through your senses, it's the watcher, it's the listener, and the feeler. So then as you sit in your silence, is that consciousness, that presence that comes to the fore. That's your consciousness itself. And that's the consciousness of being. It's a state of oneness. And this is one of the challenges with it, is that in the oneness, there's not two-ness. So like if you're looking at your thoughts, you go, there's my thoughts. You can't say that when you're in your consciousness of being. You're just in the being of it. So a lot of the times when people were in that being of it at the start, they'll only notice afterwards. And what I mean by that is We get this all the time in class. People will be sitting there for 20 minutes or lying down for 20 minutes, and it'll just feel like 5 minutes to them. And you say, that was 20 minutes, or that was half an hour. And they're like, what? No way. It's that only felt like 5 minutes. And the reason is that when we're in the reflective mind, if you said bread and butter, is that you look on the mind screen, you say bread, you say butter, you hear bread and butter. But imagine you said bread, and then you dropped into the consciousness of being, and you're in that being, and that it's timeless. There's no measure of time there. So you're just in consciousness itself, and you're in a timeless state. And then 20 minutes later, all you heard yourself saying is butter. So there's bread, you dropped into the oneness of being for 20 minutes, and then you came back to the reflection and you said butter. Is that if you weren't attuned to that sense of being or that sense of consciousness, you would think that you thought bread and butter nearly instantly with each other, bread and then butter. But there's this gap of time where you're not recognizing time, so you don't notice the space of it. And that can happen. So people come out of a relaxation and go, what? That felt like 5 minutes. But yet it was 20 minutes, it was half an hour. Because they had dropped into the oneness of being within themselves. Now, after a while, people start to settle into that, and then they start to notice that as they begin to merge into that oneness of being, is their consciousness is still there, but it dissipates. And what I mean by that is that rather than saying I, because look, I point at myself, I, or when I point at my thoughts, there's my thoughts, there's an I in that. But when I come into my center, is I dissolves. There's no I anymore, there's just being. So now my consciousness just permeates into a spaciousness. So it begins to feel like I'm everywhere at once. I get this wonderful sense of omnipresence. And literally, that consciousness of being is there continually. It's been there all the time. It's been in every moment of our lives. It's perpetually there. And it is omnipresent within us. And it is omnipresent itself. And that means that our awareness, our spatial awareness, it permeates. You get this beautiful spatial awareness of, remember the mind field? Is the mind opening up? Is consciousness filling that mind? Now the mind is opening up with consciousness. It's beautiful. Okay, so that's what happens. You come into that, the bigness of it, and it becomes boundless. So when you're sitting in your silence, is you begin to feel the boundlessness of it, of that open mind, but also with the presence of being within it. Okay, so now you get the idea. So now I'm going to talk you through it. Is you're still in your sway, and let's do a little bit of spatial awareness first. So get a sense of where you are in the room, your room. Get a sense of where everything else is in the room. And then begin to notice the sounds in the room, sounds in the building, sounds outside the room. Equally is through your mind's eye, between your eyebrows, your mind's eye, when you look inwards, is we get that sense of consciousness at the mind's eye. So we're consciously looking inwards. So from your mind's eye, also observe your body. Get a sense of your body. Get a sense of all the sensations in your body. And again, think about all those different sensations in your body, but just allowing them to be sensations. And it's like you're in the physical body, but then there's all the spaciousness of it, but then there's all these sensations. Is you can be in the emotional, energetic body, so you can be in the energetic, your sense of aliveness, and then there's all the sensations and feelings of feeling and emotions themselves. And you can be in your mind is open, your mind screen, and you can be in your thoughts, and then you can be in the mind field where there's states of consciousness themselves. You're just getting a sense of your inner space, and then just noticing the sounds and sensations and feelings in there. Now pick one, whether it's an external sound or an internal sensation. And I want you to get a sense of externally the distance between you and the sound, or internally the distance between your mind's eye and the sensation in your body, as an example. And you might be feeling your ankle. And once you get a sense of the distance, then just recognize the space in between. And then you're just beginning to open up spatial awareness. And whether it's internal or external, doesn't matter. It's the same space. And then just continue to do that. Some will be more obvious to the fore, and there'll be the mid ground, and then the foreground. You may even be thinking of a memory. So if you think of a memory from last week, you can get a sense of your mind's eye and a memory from last week, and that sense of distance between you and that memory, and then the space in between. And whatever you think it is, that's what it is. Trust your intuition. Intuition. Allow your intuition to just be there. There's no need to second guess it. You're just opening up your spatial awareness. And notice after a while that your spatial awareness becomes much more spontaneous. Is you'll notice a sensation or a thought or whatever it is, a sound going by, and you just get that sense of distance and space in between naturally. You're just now opening up to that spatial awareness within yourself. And I want you to know that you're doing that consciously. Know what you're doing. Now know how you're doing it while you're doing it. And again, you're activating that sense of knowing within yourself. You know you're centering yourself, and then you know you're opening up your spatial awareness, and you know how you're doing it while you do it. Now, from there, I just want you to now hold a state where your intention is to understand. Remember, we all want to be seen. So now you hold that space open and see. Just observe. There's no right, no wrong, no good, no bad. Just everything is as it is. Take everything that comes at face value, that you're just watching. And then open up the space to feel. And what I mean by that is if a thought is coming in or a memory is coming in, is greeted at the door. Greeted at the door of your spaciousness. It's coming into your consciousness, your awareness. And then give it the space to express itself. So that's your energy, is you want to feel it. So give it the space to express itself. And then as it expresses itself, is as it comes to a point of completion, when it comes to an end, is again, let it go peacefully. So that you're allowing whatever to come in, you're allowing it to come in, you're greeting it mindfully, and then you're giving your space over to express it. Let it express itself. Like a sensation in your body. Let it express itself. And then as it expresses itself, notice the sensations ease off and they drift away, and then you're just peacefully letting it go. And we don't need to delve into the rights and wrongs of it, the goods or bads of it. It is what it is. Is if you're sitting there and let's say your foot's getting a little bit numb and it's a little bit uncomfortable, well, slightly adjust. You don't need to sit there in the distraction and the fight of it. Is if something's too distracting, adjust yourself. If your lower back's a little stiff, support yourself. If you need to breathe a little slower and a little bit deeper, support yourself by breathing a little slower and a little bit deeper. That you're just holding the space open with awareness and energy. And then you're allowing whatever comes in, the positive or the negative, the good or the bad, the up or the down, you're allowing it to come in and you're just treating them all equally. So they all get your attention and they all get your energy and they can express themselves, and it's just your intention is to watch, feel, understand. And you don't have to understand everything. Sometimes it's just wonderful just to be seen. A lot of the times that's really what we want from somebody. We just want somebody to see us or feel us. We're not looking for somebody to fix us. It's just see us or feel us. So even just seeing yourself and feeling yourself is really, really soothing. So there's no need to go fixing anything. Just be in that state of mind for yourself. As it's absolutely gorgeous. As you're gently swaying, again, let's focus a little bit on the breath a bit more. And we'll use the breath to connect into the five senses. So that as you sway, it's just feeling that lovely connection in the body, and you're sitting in the absolute potential of yourself. You can experience that sense of, you've got your full potential. You're open to the full possibilities of your experience, and you're coming into the ground of that. You're grounding yourself into the true potential of yourself. So your mind is open to that potential. And then you're allowing yourself to breathe nice and easy and slow. Now think about breathe slow enough that you can begin to feel the engagement of your lungs. Your lungs are a pair of muscles, and that breathe slow enough, not too slow, but slow enough that the muscles of your the muscles of your lungs meet the muscles of your body. That your muscles of your lungs meet the integrity of your body, and you're breathing that tone, and it just grounds you physically into your body. It's very, very soothing, and you're sitting in the potential of that ground. That ground is just overflowing with potential. And you're holding that potential for yourself. You're holding the ground open for yourself. And that whoever comes in, whatever comes in, is you're able to hold that ground and hold the ground in its absolute potential. It's very powerful. And then you're breathing and you're letting yourself flow in your breath. And as you flow in your breath, is you're holding again that potential of fluidity, that ability to just keep things moving, to let things flow. And then you're allowing whatever come in. If it's a sensation, you're letting it flow. If it's a thought, let it flow. If it's the sound of a car outside and it's going by, just follow the flow of it as it goes by. And you're sitting in that absolute potential of it. And you're allowing yourself to observe the subconscious experience of it, the way it is not the way it should be, not the way we want it to be, but the way it is, that you're just allowing yourself to be as you are. And that allows us to bring in our attachments. Is we might be bringing in a bit of hurt, or we could be bringing in a bit of pleasure we're attached to. Whatever it is, any idea, any story, anything that comes in, is give it the ground, let it flow, and then just hold open that potential. And then allow yourself to just experience the treating of that as real. Is sometimes the subconscious mind treats things as real that are not real. And give yourself permission to tell your full story of what you think is real. And as you listen to yourself telling yourself a story, and we can behave fully as if it's real, the fact that we're doing it consciously is allowing you to begin to recognize the difference between the reality of it and the hurt of it. And a lot of the times when we tell ourselves the hurt story, is we're telling ourselves the story from a place of separation. But as we allow ourselves to hear the hurt of it truly, the hurt story comes out and we're telling it as if it's real. When we allow ourselves to hear the reality of that story, it's drawing us into the intimacy of that experience. But rather than getting drawn into the getting caught in the attachment of it, is we're actually holding the space open to allow ourselves to tell ourselves the full story. And as we tell ourselves the full story, we're just wanting to understand, we're wanting to feel, and we're allowing ourselves to do that. And that we're holding the space open. So a lovely way to do that is with the breath again. Allow yourself to expand and contract. So breathe in a way that allows you to feel the momentum of your breath, and it expands on the inhale, and you get a lovely sense of contraction on your exhale. It's very, very soothing. And that you're breathing into your navel, your rib cage, your upper chest, holding the space open. So as you contract into your navel, your rib cage, and your upper chest, you continue to hold the space open. You're breathing the life force of the space. You're connecting right into the energetics of it, connecting to the flow, connecting to the heat of the story, the life force of it, the intensity of awareness within it. You're just holding it open, and you're just allowing the story to move through you. Whatever that story is, you're just allowing yourself to just let the story move through you. And as it leaves, is you let it leave. And then you find yourself just maybe in a moment of stillness or a moment of calmness. And then another sensation comes in. And again, you offer that your ground, you let it flow, you're breathing the space of it, you're observing, you're feeling, and you're just allowing it to be, whatever it is. If it's your hurt story, let it in. If it's your truth story, let it in. If it offers you a little bit, take the little bit. We don't need to force anything. We're just letting it be. And we're just moving with ourselves very, very gracefully, very, very gently, holding the space open. And then we're going to allow ourselves to be light in it. So as you breathe, is what I want you to do is notice the peaks of your inhale. And as you come to the peak of your inhale, careful to breathe the tone, but not overbreathe. So you don't want the peak of the inhale to be tight, but you want to feel the tone of it. And as you come to the peak of it, I want you to just surf the peak of your inhale. Stay in the pause at the peak of your inhale for a couple of extra moments. And then when you come into your exhale again, gracefully, is don't let the breath just sink, is go nice and gracefully into your exhale. So at the end of your exhale, come to the pause at the end of your exhale and just rest a couple of more moments in the pause at the end of the exhale. So as you flow in your breath, you're meeting the ground of your body. You're meeting that earth element. And then you're flowing in the fluidity of it. You're in that beautiful expansion and contraction of it. And as you reach the peaks, I want you to glide in the lightness of it. You're just gliding in the lightness of the breath, the lightness of the space. You're just in the air, the lightness of it. And then you're holding that space open for yourself lightly. So think about it, the lightest touch that you need to keep your inner space open. And you're just allowing all things to come in with awareness. Just let them have their expression, the energy, the life, let them be felt. And then you're just gently letting them out. When they're leaving naturally, you're just peacefully letting them go. And again, it can be a sensation in your body. You can be thinking about the shopping you're going to do tomorrow or the shopping you did yesterday. It honestly doesn't matter. It is the skills of just holding that space open and allowing whatever come in, allowing it to move through and express itself, and allowing it to peacefully go. You're just getting used to inviting in whatever that wants to come in, and you're holding that inner space open. And literally, that's the ether. You're in the spaciousness of it, and you're just holding the ground, letting it be fluid, expanding and contracting into the space, breathing into it, meeting the lightness of the space. And then again, you're just on the ether itself, the space of it yourself. And then in that, what I want you to do is, I want you to become aware of the listener. I just want you to sit in the silence of yourself. And as you sit in the silence of yourself, sit in the silence of your awareness. And again, there will be sensations in the body. There will be thoughts in the mind. There will be emotions. In the energetic body, there will be memories. There will be sounds going on all around you. Is allow all those to be sounds. And allow all those sounds to come from that inner silence of you and return to that inner silence of you. And that all those beautiful sounds are just heightening your own sense of presence of being within yourself. Heightening your watcher. Watching from a place of clearness. You're just in the clear mind of things. So you're taking everything at face value. So if a car drives by, that's all it is. Not good or bad, it's just a car drives by. You feel your heart beat in your armpit, it's just your heart beating in your armpit. It's just face value. You have a thought about, I must ring so-and-so. Okay, you take it at face value. I must ring so-and-so. You're just letting it in. You think about anything at all, you feel anything at all, you're just taking it all at face value because you're just listening. You're just watching. You're just watching the happening of your own experience, neither right nor wrong, good nor bad. That you're just sitting in that state of feeling within yourself. You're just in a state of feeling. Your ability to just be receptive to your life force, to life itself. You're just sitting in that connection. And again, notice how your sense of consciousness of being is expanding. It's rising more and more. Your consciousness permeates through that sense of clarity. It permeates through the stillness. It permeates through that wonderful sense of feeling. And then you're in the subtlety of that, is bringing in that sense of smell. I want you to breathe in a subtle way. Imagine you're smelling a flower. Think about the nicest flower you've ever smelled. And then you want to really breathe nice and slow, that you're just breathing the softness of that smell. Now keep doing that, but put the sense of smell down, but bring in the quality of action in your breath, the quality of action in your nose. Is smell and breathe the subtlety of your breath. And just come into that subtle sense of presence. And then your taste. I want you to gently swallow a few times in your own time. And as you do, just notice the intimacy of that experience. That you can feel your throat swallow, you can feel your tongue. That you're just coming into that consciousness of your inner being, just in the subtlety and the intimacy of taste itself. I want you to come into the intimacy of that experience, of the just being of yourself. And again, you're still observing maybe a sensation in your body, sounds in the room, outside the room, memories, future or past, thoughts, emotions, whatever it is you're observing them from a place of silence and consciousness. You're observing them from a place of clarity. You're watching from a place of feeling and connection. And then there's the subtlety of just observing the subtle experience. And then the intimacy of it. That all experiences are intimate. And then you're just in the consciousness of that. So feel your consciousness expanding through all your senses. It's like all your senses together just radiating consciousness. And you're holding that consciousness in a beautiful sense of inner presence. And that presence just radiates everything. Whatever comes in, it gets your full attention. Whatever comes in, it gets to, it's like coming into a room, there's a lovely heat in the room. Whoever comes into the room gets the heat, gets the radiance of you, your consciousness of being. And just for a couple of more minutes, I want you to sit in the being of that and just sensing that intuitive rightness within it. It's not a thought, it's just a direct experience of the rightness of it, your intuitive knowing. I want you to sit in that intuitive knowing within yourself. It's beautiful. Nice and gently. Gently bringing your awareness back. Gently opening your eyes. Oh, very nice. Okay, so that's the end of our beginner's course, session 6 of 6. Well done. Well done for all that. That's 9 hours of discussion and practice. And you can see the space that we're bringing ourselves to more and more. You'll see that as we go along. I will eventually because I've lots of courses to do. I'll do an intermediate course in this. I'll do an advanced course, and I'll do a mastering course. So on this course, we just brought in all the basic elements to activate the third eye, engaging the chakra. I talked up a little bit through the chakra, through basically you layer the chakras in. So you center yourself, you activate the root, you come into the present moment, and you come into the present moment of your consciousness. Yeah. You want to bring your sacral, you want to bring it to life. So I talked through it a little bit on this course. On the intermediate course, what I will do is I will go back into the third eye chakra, and I'll layer all the 7 chakras in the third eye. So that's the intermediate course. Is I'll bring in all the 7 chakras and I'll layer them into the third eye. On the advanced course, I'll take the third eye and I'll bring the third eye specifically into each chakra. So we'll activate the third eye specifically into each chakra. And then on the mastering course is what we do is we look to take that experience and we look to layer it into our lives continuously, so that we're truly awakened and engaged in it. So that's the process. I know it seems like a lot. It is, however, is the process that we went through for the third eye. I'm going to have exactly the next chakra, which is the sacral chakra. I'm going to have exactly the same conversation with you about the sacral chakra and take you through the same process. So we'll go through the centering and the knowing of it, and is coming into the consciousness and energy of it, and then the 3 tendencies, holding the opposites, and how to activate the 4 states of consciousness to bring in our full potential and awaken it, and then bringing in the 5 elements and the 6 senses. We'll do that now with the next chakra, so that you'll hear the conversation again, but we're relating it to the sacral and be the solar plexus and the heart. So the more you follow the process, you'll realize that the first one's more challenging, second one is not so difficult, third one, I'm really beginning to get the process that he's taking me through, so that you get it more and more. And what we're looking to do is eventually is bring all the chakras into one. So you're in your sacral chakra, you need to come into the present moment when you need to root into your sacral. You need to bring your sacral to life, then you need to become vital and abundant in it. Then you come into the heart of your sacral, and then you come into the wisdom of your sacral. So it's the same process for all of them. And then we take the sacral and we bring the sacral into each other chakra. And what you're doing is you're beginning to experience the multi-dimensional nature of your own being and coming into its full potential. It's a super journey. Great story. So the more you get into it, you basically realize that there's a pattern to it. There's a method to the madness, so to speak. And so the more you understand that, is you'll realize that, okay, a lot of hard work now, but by the third time we do this, you go, this is really beginning to take on a life for me. I'm really getting a really clear sense of this. And you'll start to go ahead of me in the conversation. You'll start to realize, I know where he's going now. He's going to say this and he's going to say that, but he's relating it to this situation. So when you get into that space, that'll be a super space for you to get into. But for now, thank you for all that time and energy that you put in. I wish you the very best in your experience in it. I wish you get the best out of it. I'll keep delivering these courses. We'll keep going into it 101 ways. And over time, you'll get to a point where you will have your truth of it. You'll be holding your truth of your experience. And you won't be just in what is it? You'll be in the how of it. You'll know how you're doing it while you're doing it. Fascinating. So for now, thank you very much.